My lecture today is called Elvis Presley and Buddhism. Just one thing I want you to understand. In the Go Show, it's called The Gift of Rights. It reads, they look at secular matters in terms of Buddhism, whereas the Lotus Sutra says that secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are studying Buddhism, we who are Nichiren Buddhists study Buddhism from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra. It is the Lotus Sutra that teaches that secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. Now, our lecture today is called Elvis Presley and Buddhism. Now, why is this important, ladies and gentlemen? One of the most remarkable and deep cultural aspects of American history and culture is rock and roll music. Ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to understand the culture of America, it was rock and roll music that freed white people. What? Did y'all hear what Anthony Elmore said? Anthony Elmore said it was rock and roll music that freed white people. Oh man, I'm going to get into something very, very good and exciting. See, until white people got rock and roll music, they wasn't free. Even though they had us black folk as slaves, it took rock and roll music to free white people, because when the first music that came to America, that originated in America, was called Negro spirituals. Now, when the Europeans came to America, they brought in the polkas and they brought in the waltz, but it was those, it was that black music, that where the white folk learned to rock, and they learned to roll, because that's what rock and roll music comes from Memphis, Tennessee. Now, can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, that Memphis, Tennessee, we are the soul of America. Ain't no doubt about it, Memphis, Tennessee is the soul of America. Now, let me tell you about a con job that happened in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, I'm sitting here watching this con job. Now, they got these priests, and I was a part of the Nichiren Buddhist set. Now, even though I was a part of the Nichiren Buddhist set, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and all the time these Japanese priests would come to America, and everybody said, oh, the priest this, and oh, the priest this, and the priest that, and these dudes, Japanese dudes, come in with a robe on, and everybody falling out dying, oh, the priest, oh, my goodness, the priest. I said, what the hell do you say? I ain't never heard the priest say nothing. I ain't never heard him do nothing. I ain't never known these guys to teach anything. And the SGI, they brought this guy, George Kline, here. And everybody falling out over this little name by the name of Daisaki Ken. Oh, he's so great. Oh, he's so magnificent. Oh, he's like a Buddha. I'm saying, why are these folks getting all upset and falling out and dying? Now, what happens is, ladies and gentlemen, what you have in the Buddhist teachings, you have people who distort history. And when you have people who distort history and make history a mystery, then these are people who are deceiving thee. Now, our lecture is called Elvis Presley and Buddhism because Elvis Presley is one of the greatest iconic figures in the history of America. Just in 2013, the National Geographic magazine listed Memphis, Tennessee as one of the top 10 locations, must-see locations in the world. Can you imagine the National Geographic magazine naming Memphis, Tennessee as one of the most must-see locations in the world? Why is Memphis, Tennessee one of the most must-see locations in the world? And how is it that some little Japanese punk priest could come here to Memphis, Tennessee, don't teach nothing, don't know nothing about the history, and everybody's, oh, he's so great, oh, he's so fantastic. And this guy don't even know anything about the greatest iconic figures in the culture who shaped the culture of American history, because these guys does not understand the culture. Now, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. Now, those of you who are listening to this lecture, I'm giving it to you black style. Now, we are different, because when you listen to an Asian teach Buddhism, you know, this dude going to come here, he's going to have a robe on, and that robe kind of get into the minds of people, because they say, well, this guy, he has went somewhere and he's attained this level of enlightenment. Just because some dude got a robe on, that don't mean they're enlightened. These guys not even enlightened to the common sense teachings of Buddhism. Now, the brother here going to enlighten you to the common sense teachings of Buddhism. Now, in Buddhism, we study Buddhism from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra. It is only the Lotus Sutra that teaches about 3,000 worlds in a momentary state of existence. Now, let me break this thing down for you. The Lotus Sutra teaches there are 3,000 worlds in a momentary state of existence. You have 10 worlds. Each of the 10 worlds can exist in each other. So you have 10 times 10 equals 100. Then you take the 100 worlds times the 10 aspects. So 100 times 10 equals 1,000. And you take the 1,000 worlds times the 3 realms, which is 1,000 times 3 is 3,000, and you come to 3,000 worlds in a momentary state of existence. This is what the Lotus Sutra teaches us. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to understand Buddhism, or you want to understand Nichiren Buddhism, or if you want to understand the Shakyamuni Buddhism's highest teachings, his highest teachings comes from the Lotus Sutra. It is only the Lotus Sutra that teaches the 3,000 worlds in a momentary state of existence. Now, let's get back to the phenomena of Elvis Presley, one of the greatest iconic figures in the history of America that's even affecting us today. Now, in the 10 worlds, let's begin by telling you about the 10 aspects of Elvis Presley. Now, the 10 aspects is this. The first one is an appearance. Elvis Presley appeared. He had a nature. His nature was rock and roll music. And there's an entity. The entity was Elvis Presley. But he had something that was important, and that was power. And because that entity had a power, it had an influence. And because it had an influence, there was also number 6, which is called an inherent cause. Something caused this to happen, the inherent cause. And the inherent cause happened because there was a thing called relationship. Then the relationship happened. There's a thing called latent effect. There are things that Elvis Presley did that has not even happened. That's the latent effect. And because you have latent effect, you also have manifest effects. And then you come to the 10, which is the consistency of beginning to the end. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have given you the 10 aspects of Buddhism. Now, only Buddhists know the true entity of all phenomena. This is what the Lotus Sutra reads. It says only Buddhists know the true entity of all phenomena, because all phenomena, again, they have a, again, There's appearance, there's nature, there's entity, there's power, there's influence. Number 6, there's an inherent cause. Then there's a relationship. And then there is a latent effect, a manifest effect, and there's a consistency of beginning to the end. So, if we want to understand all phenomena in the universe has 3,000 worlds in a momentary state of existence, or if you understand phenomena from the standpoint of the 10 aspects, then you can begin to understand things. And now, let's talk about Buddhism. Now, you had these Japanese priests coming all the way from Japan to the soul of America, and they died on people because they got on a robe. But here's a man that does not even understand the culture and the history, and everybody falling, oh, he's so great, oh, he's so great. If you had an understanding of the Lotus Sutra, and someone is talking Buddhism, and they not teaching Buddhism from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra, then you need to kick this guy out of here, because this guy is not teaching Buddhism. Now, listen, ladies and gentlemen, what the Japanese taught is culture. They are masters of teaching you culture. They're not teaching you Buddhism. When you do the prayers, they do the prayers in Japanese. This is called Shindoku. This is the Japanese language. And when you recite the Lotus Sutra in the Japanese language, what they are doing is that that is a means of trapping you. That is a means of engaging you in a cultural domination. That's why they teach you the prayers in Japanese. There's no benefit in teaching somebody some words that you don't even understand. This is a con job. Now, let's get back to our lecture. It's called Elvis Presley and Buddhism. Now, why is Elvis Presley important? Elvis Presley is important because he is one of the greatest iconic figures in the history of America. And what Elvis Presley did years ago still affects us today, because it was Elvis Presley that actually freed white people. He didn't free black folk, because even though there were slaves and they was on a plantation, the one thing that the slaves could do, they could look inside their inner self in the worst horrific situation in the world, and they could dance, and they could find a sense of joy, because even though they're prisoners on the outside, they could go in and tap a level of consciousness on the inside of themselves to where they could find a joy even in the most horrific situation. Now, let's bring this thing back home to Elvis Presley. In 1935, I think it was January 8th, 1935, a young man was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, by the name of Elvis Aaron Presley. Now, Elvis Presley, when he was a young man, used to go to the church meetings and hear black music in Tupelo, Mississippi. Also, another phenomenon happened to Elvis. In 1946, a man by the name of Big Arthur Kuduk recorded a song called That's All Right. The song went like this: that's all right, mama, that's all right with me. That's all right, mama, that's all right, dun, 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 that's all right. Anyway, Elvis in 1946 was 11 years old, and he used to listen to Big Arthur Kuduk on the radio at 11 years old in Tupelo, Mississippi. And Elvis got his guitar style from Big Arthur Kuduk. Now, let us move into the year 1948. In 1948, a young Elvis Aaron Presley moved downtown to the projects. In 1948, he was 13 years old. Now, something happened in Memphis that was very unique in 1947. In 1947, they launched the first black formatted radio station in the nation. It's called WDIA. Now, as we said, in 1948, a young Elvis Presley came to Memphis, Tennessee. And in 1947, history was made in Memphis because they launched the first black formatted radio station in the nation called WDIA. And one person who worked at WDIA was a very famous guy. And he was a musician, and he was known as Blues Boy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you don't know this famous WDIA disc jockey as Blues Boy, but you do know him when I tell you about his initials was B.B. King. And B.B. King was a disc jockey at WDIA radio station. Now, in 1948, Elvis Presley was only 13 years old. Now, let's begin to tell you the history. Now, just down the road, about 60 miles down the road, there is a place or a city called Clarksdale, Mississippi. Now, in Clarksdale, Mississippi, there was a young man that was born in 1931. Now, you know the young man as Ike Whisper Turner. Now, Ike Turner and a guy by the name of Jackie Brimstone came up from Clarksdale, Mississippi to a studio just down the street. It's called Sun Recording Studios. This is in 1951. A 20-year-old Ike Turner came to Sun Recording Studios and he recorded a song called Rocket 88. He and a guy by the name of Jackie Brimstone. It was about the Rocket 88 Oldsmobile. That's the first rock and roll record in the history. Now, in 1951, Elvis Presley was born in 1935, so he was only 16 years old. Ike Turner was 20 years old, but they were brilliant young men. Now, Elvis Presley came to Memphis. He was staying in Memphis in the projects downtown. He was not a very wealthy white man. He was a poor guy because he was on welfare in the projects. Now, Elvis used to hang out with a guy by the name of Calvin Newborn. Now, of the famous Newborn family, there was Calvin Newborn, there was Phineas Newborn, and there was another brother, I'm not thinking of his other name, but they were the Newborns. And they played different instruments. They owned a music store on Bill Street. And Elvis used to come and hang out with Calvin Newborn. Calvin taught Elvis how to shake that leg. Because Calvin used to jump around the stage and do a lot of stuff. And they used to play at a club in West Memphis, Arkansas called the Plantation Club. This was kind of like the Cotton Club in Harlem, only this club was for whites only, but they had a black band. And Elvis used to come hear this music. He used to hang out with Calvin Newborn, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we move up to 1953. Now, what happened in 1953? Well, number one, yours truly, Anthony Elmore, was born in 1953. But in 1953, Elvis Presley graduated Humes High School. So there he was, 18 years old, graduating high school. Now, when he got out of high school, the dude used to drive a gravel truck, a dump truck. Now, Elvis used to run around that dump truck, and he used to go to West Memphis, Arkansas, to hear Ike Turner at the gambling place where the brothers used to gamble on 11th Street. So Ike be playing the piano, you know, and Elvis knock on the door, and he coming down, he hear the brothers, he jam with the black folk. Now this is early. He used to go to the Plantation Club in West Memphis, Arkansas, so Elvis used to drive the dump truck to all these places, so they kind of knew Elvis Presley. Now, we moved to 1954. Elvis goes to Sun Recording Studio, and he just recorded a song. Now, he just loved black music, so he went into the studio, and he recorded a song called That's All Right. Now, this is a song that he heard when he was only 11 years old in Tupelo, Mississippi. Now, he used to hear this song called That's All Right, and he went into the studio. Now, Sam Phillips was not even in the studio at the time. Sam Phillips was a white guy from Alabama who grew up around black music, and Sam was wishing for the day that he could find a white guy to do black music, because the black singers back in the 1950s, they used to have to hide behind a curtain and not show white people that they were black. Even though they knew they were black, they couldn't show their face. And then when they sell an album, they used to have to put the white folk on the album because a black man could not show the album, so they were looking for a white guy. Now, let's bring this thing to Buddhism and understand Buddhism. Now, for those of you who study Buddhism, there's a ghost show called Letter from Sardo. Letter from Sardo reads, a sutra states, quote, that both the crow's blackness and the heron's whiteness are actually deep stains of their past karma. The non-Buddhists fail to recognize this and claim it was the work of nature, unquote. Nichiren Buddhism tells us that what happened with Elvis Presley was a matter of his karma, ladies and gentlemen. What happened to African Americans is a matter of karma. Buddhism teaches you that we've lived different existences and we have cause and effect relationships, and the reason Elvis had the fortune that he had and the reason that the blacks had the fortune that they had, because it's a matter of karma. But now, as we get into the story of Elvis Aaron Presley, there's another phenomenon that I want you to understand. And I don't want the white people to get upset, but the white people know it. But the black folk don't know this. Now there's a word in Kenny, I see you back there. Kenny, it's called Melungeons. That's called Mulungians. You got it? Mm-hmm. Do you know what a Mulungian is, Kenny?
They some dark-skinned white people.
No, not dark-skinned white people. See, they used to thought they were some shipwrecked. See, what happened was they thought they were shipwrecked white folk, right? Who were like from Greek and the Middle East, because they were kind of had that olive skin color. Yeah. But what happened was just recently they found out that when they did the DNA test, what it was some black men who had white women and they had children and they moved into the mountains so they would be persecuted. Right. Now, this is what the statistics say about Elvis Aaron Presley. It says this: scientists believe that a stronger case could be made that the king of rock and roll may have African roots, according to a recent DNA study published in the Journal of Genetic Genealogy. Presley's molecule encoding falls right in line with the Melungians. Basically, Elvis Presley was a brother. Now, the white folk don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear this. But what does it say? Only Buddhists know the true entity of all phenomena. Now, Elvis used to come right down the street there to Trigg Avenue Baptist Church when it was right there at Bellevue in Trigg. And there was Dr. Herbert Brewster, and Elvis used to come to the church service to hear the black music. Now, in 1954, ladies and gentlemen, you had a young man, Elvis Presley, who recorded this song called That's All Right. Now, boy, when Sam Phillips heard that song, he said, oh my goodness, dollar signs kicked in. Whoa, I'm finna get rich now because, boy, we got a white man who can sing black music because this was white folk was listening. They were waiting.
Yeah.
They were waiting. It was the time had come.
Yeah.
Now, let me run something else on you, Kenny.
The Great White Hope.
Now, right, well, sort of. But now, there is a Nichiren Shonen. When he teaches Buddhism, there's a thing called 5 Guides to Propagation. Now, this is how you propagate Buddhism, but these 5 guides could actually tell how any phenomena could manifest. Now, the 5 guides are, number 1, teaching, people's capacity, time, country, and sequence of propagation. Now, that's for Buddhism, but let me put this in the form of Elvis Presley. The first guide to propagation is what? Teaching. Now, what did Elvis Presley teach? He taught white people, and he taught the world that white people can sing black music, right? Okay. That's the teaching. And Elvis was the greatest rock and roll teacher to white people in the world.
That's right.
Now, number 2 is called people's capacity. Now, you have to understand in 1954, white people did not have the capacity to accept black music, right?
Okay.
They had a capacity.
Right.
But Elvis helped the people's capacity. And then number 3, you have to come with the time. See, couldn't no white man had emerged in a segregated area, but what happened? Elvis was a little boy, the radio is not segregated, so as a white boy, he could listen to the radio, learn the music, and grow to understand this music, even though you didn't associate with blacks, but the time was, his time had came because, what? Rock and roll music had already emerged. Because what? In 1951 in Memphis, Tennessee, Ike Turner had already came. Yeah. Right? Now, you got also, Kenny, let me lay it on you, Kenny. They don't want to talk to me.
I hear you.
They don't like to talk to Am, Kenny. Because, Kenny, I can tell you about the 1930 babies. Can I tell you something? Kenny, can I tell them about some 1930 babies?
Go ahead.
Okay, in the 1930s, some babies was born. Just like we got rap music.
Right.
Well, Ike Turner was born in what? 1931.
Right.
Now, there's another brother that was born in about 1931. Look, guess what his name was?
Who?
Sam Cooke.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look, Sam was bad, right?
Yeah.
Who else was born in the 1930s? Jackie Wilson. You got it? There's Sam Cooke, there's Jackie Wilson. Guess who else was born about that time? A guy by the name of Little Richard.
Oh, yeah.
So Little Richard, James Brown, Sam Cooke, all these guys were born about that time.
Right.
And Elvis was born in 1935.
Yeah.
So the pioneers of music,
that's right,
of this American music had happened. The rock and roll music, Elvis Presley didn't start no rock and roll music. What he did, he was not an innovator, he was an imitator. Exactly. Because he imitated the black music. But that's okay, because what? You gotta have what? The teachings, the capacity, the time, and the country.
Okay.
See, the music couldn't have evolved nowhere else because it can only come from what? America.
Exactly.
And why did this music come from Memphis? Because Memphis was the slave capital of the world, and you had all the slaves here, and so that's why the blues music came here. That's why all the music, because Memphis was a cultural entity that could actually bring about this kind of music. So that's why Elvis Presley could emerge, because you had all this music. The blues was both, blues, jazz, soul, and rock and roll was born right here. Now, then you had the sequence of propagation, which the fifth entity. So that means Elvis came at the right time.
Right.
Now let's break it down a little bit more, Kenny. Now, what happened was, Now, in 1954, Elvis didn't have no original music. All he can do is do black music. Now, there was a woman called Big Mama Thornton. You heard of Big Mama Thornton?
Mm-hmm. I heard of her. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
What she sing?
You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Crying all the time.
Rocking all the time.
Yeah.
You ain't nothing but a hound. Well, look, Elvis took Big Mama Thornton record. He took the black music. And Elvis took all this music. Now, let's see, Kenny, since you studying and since you know history, there was one guy that had a mellow voice and an operatic voice, and Elvis took this guy's style.
Arbison.
No, his name was Roy Hamilton.
Hamilton, okay, yes.
And he had a song saying, oh, my love, my darling, I have hungered for your touch.
Yes.
And still much I need your love. Look, Roy Hamilton, Elvis took the style of Roy Hamilton.
Yeah.
And then there was another brother whose style Elvis took. And Elvis got the hip movement. You know the hip movement come from Elvis got?
Who, Jackie Wilson?
Jackie Wilson. They called it Mr. Excitement.
Yeah.
Jackie Wilson. So Elvis took Mr. Excitement, a little bit of Roy Hamilton, a little bit of Arthur Kruger, a little bit of Calvin Newman, a little bit of Ike Turner, and boy, he became a force to reckon with. But let me tell you something, Kenny. Let's look at this from the words of Elvis himself. See, you ain't got to take my word for it. All you have to do is listen to, read what Elvis said in that 1956 interview. They interviewed Elvis Presley. He said, what? Quote, the colored folks been singing it and playing it just like I'm doing now. Man, more years than I know. They played it like that in their shanties, their juke joints, and nobody paid it no mind till I goosed it up. I got it from them. Down in Tupelo, Mississippi, I used to hear old Arthur Kruger bang his box the way I do now, and I said if I ever got to the place where I could feel like old Arthur felt, I'd be a music man like nobody ever saw. Unquote. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley himself.
Yeah.
Elvis said he got it from the brothers.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about Elvis, and let's go into this history, and let's explain this Buddhism. Because one of the things I want to clear up, Kenny, and that is, what's my boy? My boy was Chucky D. Now, in 1989, Kenny, a cultural revolution happened in America.
Right.
And that was Chucky D. And you remember Chucky D, what group Chucky D had?
Public Enemy?
Public Enemy. Public Enemy had this song, and they called Elvis a racist.
Yeah. Right.
They
Fight
said,
the power.
now this is what he said. He said the song was called Fight the Power. He said Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant ass to me. Straight up. That sucker was simple, plain. Elvis Aaron Presley was a racist. Now, me as a brother, Anthony F. Elmore, you'll see a picture of me and Chucky D. Chucky came to Isaac Funeral, and I took a picture with Chucky D. Now, even though Chucky said Elvis was a racist in 1989, I got to straighten something else out, Kenny. Elvis Presley wasn't no racist. Elvis Presley was not a racist. However, Elvis Presley was a man of his time. You got to realize Elvis grew up in a segregated society. Now, when he recorded the song in 1954, the man was only 19 years old. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what Elvis Presley did. Now, in 1954, he recorded his record. In 1956, Elvis cut a deal to make a movie. His first movie was called Love Me Tender. And he went to Hollywood and he cut this movie in 1955. And while he was doing the movie, he met with Jackie Wilson and took a picture with Jackie Wilson and told Jackie Wilson, We friends for life. And then when Jackie Wilson died, Elvis Presley, when Jackie Wilson went into a coma, Elvis Presley took care of Jackie Wilson. That is not no racist, ladies and gentlemen. Now, also, something you got to know about Elvis Presley. In 1956, I think it was August of 1956, the worst thing happened in America, Kenny. Mm-hmm. There was a young man who went down to Money, Mississippi, came from Chicago. I think he's like 13, 14-year-old boy.
Till.
His name was Emmett Till. Emmett Till allegedly whistled at a white woman, and they hung this boy, shot him, burned him up, ran over. They did the most horrific thing to this young man.
Throw him in the river.
Now, what Elvis Presley did in 1956, that Elvis Presley went to the fairgrounds with black people on a Wednesday because you could not go to the fair, but on one day a week, that's the only time they let blacks go to the fair. Because we lived in Jim Crow law in Memphis, Tennessee, and Elvis Presley went to the fair with us black people. Now, in 1955, Kenny, and in 1956 and 57, do you know that Elvis Presley was at the WDIA Good Review? And you see a picture of him and B.B. King. You see a picture of Elvis and Rufus Thomas. And you see a picture of Elvis and Bobby Bland and Elvis and all the black entertainers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about phenomena. Let's talk about cause and effect. Once upon a time, Elvis was beloved in the black community. But something happened, ladies and gentlemen. Something happened. A marketing strategy was done because in order to sell Elvis Presley to white America, they had to physically break Elvis away from black people. Did you know that, Kennedy? Mm-mm. Well, this would happen. His manager, Colonel Parker, was the consummate promoter. And what Colonel Parker did, Colonel Parker put out a rumor. And the rumor said that, the say was this: all a nigga can do for me, they said Elvis said this, all a nigga can do for me is buy my record and shine my shoes. Mm-hmm. And boy, black folk got upset with Elvis Presley. Uh-huh. They wanted nothing to do with Elvis Presley. Yeah. But boy, the white racists embraced Elvis. Uh-huh. But you know what, Kenny? They interviewed, Jet Magazine and the black newspaper came and interviewed Elvis Presley. Right. And you know what Elvis told them?
What's that?
Elvis said, anybody that knows me, that know I wouldn't say a thing like that. That's what Elvis Presley said. Mm-hmm. So Elvis didn't say it, but what happened was there was no more relationship and love between the black community and Elvis. And Elvis moved on and became one of the greatest entertainers in the world. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a guy by the name of Allen Freed. Allen Freed used to play on Radio Luxembourg, and he used to have music, and what happened was he would play the black music with the white music. Mm-hmm. So he mixed it all together, and he coined the phrase rock and roll. Now what happened was this Radio Luxembourg used to be satellite over, right? Right. To where it would go into Europe, right? Mm-hmm. Allen Freed, with his radio broadcast, Radio Luxembourg, was able to reach Europe, and particularly he reached a group of youth in Liverpool, England. In Liverpool, there was a culture. In fact, they even had a black culture in Liverpool that actually influenced the Beatles. But the youth of Liverpool would listen to this music. They would listen to Elvis. They would listen to the blues music. They would listen to this music called rock and roll. And they came out with a new an exciting genre of music, from the British, called the British Invasion. So Elvis and all the people who made the changes in music actually helped change the world. Because what the rock and roll music did was it created a youthful unifying force, a force that says we youth are changing. We are going to change the world. Now, one of the things that the British had, or one of the advantages that the British had, that Elvis Presley did not have, and that is the British had a sense of freedom. And that is, they had the ability to really express themselves. When you look at the life of Elvis Presley, and you look at who he was and what happened when he got success. Now, we talked about how Elvis would communicate and integrate with the African American community. Now, in 1957, as we said, something happened. When Colonel Parker put out that rumor that indicated that Elvis said all black people could do for him was shine his shoes and buy his records. That put a separation between African Americans and Elvis Presley. And Elvis never recovered from that, because what they actually did is that they succeeded in making Elvis something that he wasn't. And that when you think about Elvis Presley as a youth in Tupelo, Mississippi, he could go to the black church and no one would say anything. And when he came to Memphis, Tennessee, he would go to visit Trigg Avenue Baptist Church and visit Dr. Herbert Brewster and listen, and no one said anything. He could hang out with his black and white buddies, and he was actually a force for integration, a force for change. But one of the things happened to Elvis that I believe that killed Elvis most, and that is Elvis's inability to be who he was. Because once they put that wedge into Elvis Presley and saying he has to act this particular way, he could not go along and hang out with his black buddies anymore. He could not do it publicly anymore. In fact, what most people are not aware of is that Elvis was good friends with Muhammad Ali. Now, Muhammad Ali, back in the 60s, Muhammad Ali was a noted Muslim, black Muslim, who stood up for black pride. And Elvis called Muhammad Ali and asked Muhammad, he says, man, I want to get away. Can I come hang out with you? And Muhammad Ali was training in Pennsylvania in the mountains and in a little small town. And of course, Ali said, man, come on, sure, you can hang out with me. And Ali and Elvis got together and they went down to this little bar. And what was funny is that this guy was trying to sing the Elvis song. And Ali egged Elvis. Ali said, Elvis, man, why don't you go down there and sing? And so Ali egged Elvis into it. And Elvis got on the stage and started singing. And everybody at the bottom said, whoa, that's the real Elvis Presley. And the whole town in Pennsylvania emerged because they wanted to see Elvis and they had to sneak out the back door. So it's a funny thing that happened. But Elvis Presley actually made a robe for Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali fought Ken Norton, he lost the fight, so he never wore the robe anymore. But Elvis spent a lot of money to make Ali a robe. He was a very generous guy. Also, Elvis Presley was good friends with James Brown. I have researched and I can never find a picture of the king of soul with the king of rock and roll. But James Brown made the song Love Me Tender after Elvis died. He came to the funeral, and James Brown was so distressed and hurt about it. But James Brown and Elvis Presley, they were good friends. So Elvis could not openly show his love and affection for the people who had grew up with or those who had helped him to make his career. So that's one of the things about Elvis. And one of the things that I would like to see happen is that I would like to see some courageous person be able to break the shackles of racism and make a movie and show this side of Elvis Presley. You know, when Public Enemy made the song that Elvis was a racist, what they were indicating is that Elvis owes a lot of debt of gratitude to the African American community for him having a music style and for what he has gained, but he did not come out and make statements against it. He did not stand up, and I'm sure he probably regretted that, because one of the things I believe that killed Elvis Presley is staying here in Memphis, Tennessee, staying in a plantation city, living a plantation kind of life. A few years ago, I had a chance to visit Graceland, and of course, we African Americans, we actually distance ourselves from Graceland, even though Graceland is in the African American community. But I had a girlfriend whose mother was Jewish. She was, half black, and her mother was Jewish, and she wanted to see Graceland. And I went to Graceland with her. And when I went to Graceland, one of the most remarkable things happened. I saw the jungle room. And when I saw the jungle room, I said, my goodness, you see these doors here? And what I got here? What's in the jungle room is African furniture. But anyway, let's bring this lecture to a close. There's one last thing I want to mention. And let me get my notes here 1 second. In Buddhism, there is something that happened to Elvis Presley. I want you to first of all look at the pictures of the 10 worlds. In Buddhism, we talk about there's 10 worlds: hell, hunger, animality, anger, humanity, heaven, learning, self-realization, bodhisattva, and the world of Buddhahood, which is the highest world. And we show pictures of Elvis and his different life conditions. But one of the things that I see, and one of the things that Buddhism exposed, and that every time I look at this hurts me. In Buddhism, there's a sutra that talks about the 5 signs of decay. Again, listen. There's a sutra in Buddhism that talks about the 5 signs of decay. And what happened to Elvis Presley is that the 5 signs of decay is actually the sign of death. It says that you're about to die. And there was nobody who practiced Buddhism, there was nobody who could tell Elvis, and no one was close enough to him that could even recognize that Elvis was a walking dead man. The 5 signs of decay is, it says, the Nirvana Sutra describes these 5 as what? Number 1, their clothes become soiled. Now, Elvis Presley had a colon that was 5 to 6 inches, which is about double the size of a typical person's. Instead of being 4 to 5 feet long, his colon was 8 to 9 feet in length. The doctor said, we found stool in his colon, which had been there for 4 or 5 months because of his poor mortality in the bowels. He was embarrassed. He'd have accidents on stage and he has to change clothes and come back because of the way we're trying to treat his constipation. Imagine a man who is the greatest rock star in the world couldn't do a simple thing like use the toilet. That's got to be horrible to have to walk like this, to have waste in your body for 5 months. It also says that the flowers on the head wither, that you begin to lose your hair, and number 3, their bodies become dirty and smell bad. I've not been around Elvis, but it says that once you get this sign of decay, you'll walk around and be stinky. You smell bad. And number 4, they sweat under their armpits. And, you know, I'm not around Elvis, but it's just that you begin to sweat on your armpits. And the 5th one, sign of decay, is that they do not feel happy wherever they may be. That's the most horrible thing that you can ever have. No matter where you at or no matter what you do, you are going to be in hell. You're going to be in anguish. You're going to be a living, walking around corpse. That is the most horrible thing that any human being could experience. You know, for us to, you know, to look at Elvis and say, well, we're worshiping him and we got to come see him and we got to do these things. But when you look at what this man was going through, he was walking around in a living hell because he had the 5 signs of decay. But anyway, let's bring this lecture to a close. A few years ago, in 1982, I won the World Super Heavyweight Karate Kickboxing title. And had Elvis lived, say, 5 years longer, I would have had a chance to personally meet Elvis, and that Elvis was a karate fanatic. He really loved karate. And in about like 1973, 74, he brought this guy who was a middleweight champion, Bill Wallace, to Memphis. And Bill Wallace had injured his leg, and it was legendary that we were reading the magazines that Bill Wallace had injured his leg, and Elvis said, well, Bill, be at my house tonight. And around 7 o'clock. And when Bill got there, Elvis had flew in an acupuncturist, a Chinese acupuncturist, and the guy put the needles in Bill's leg, and instantly he could kick again. And Elvis helped him to renew his career. Back in 1974, I was this young, brash karate guy, and I went up to the Elvis Presley Karate School at Crosstown, right in Cleveland at Crosstown there. And I went to the karate school, and there was Red West. And Red West had a bloodshot eye because Bill Wallace had kicked him in the eye, and Bill Wallace would whoop up on Red. And Red went to school with Elvis Presley. And I went to the school, and of course this is Elvis's school, and I wanted to just check things out. And they had this kind of Western kind of thing when you go challenge the master. And I went in there and challenged Bill Wallace to a fight at Elvis Presley's Karate School. And me and Bill, we had a couple of confrontations a couple of times. But anyway, we won't go into that. Later on in life, after my career was, after I retired, they had the Elvis Presley Karate Hall of Fame, and they inducted me in the Elvis Presley Karate Hall of Fame. But anyway, let's bring this thing to a close. Our lecture again was Elvis Presley and Buddhism, and we hope you got some out of it. Thank you very much. I get down on my knees and I pray every day. I pray the Lord will suit your way. I pray every day to do my best to practice peace and love and respect. I get down on my knees and I pray every day. I pray the Lord will suit your way. The